Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to yet another edition of the Quality Dialogues. India is entering its Amrit Kal, so the pressure on us, ladies and gentlemen, is to run faster than we've ever run as a country. And that brings with us a lot of challenges. As we need stable governance, we also need robust policy, but most importantly, we need a certain level of swachhata or quality in our implementation. So some of these roles that have been played by the Quality Council of India that completes about 25 years working in the shadows. But we are now going to speak with someone who's not only spearheaded Bharat's Swachh Bharat campaign and taken India to becoming an ODF free nation, achieving some of the key goals as far as the SDG goals are concerned, but he's also now the CEO of Niti Aayog. Parameswaran Iyer ji, namaskaram.
Namaste.
And I thank you for making the time. It's a very, very tight schedule. But this is a conversation that we need to have. And so let's start with the ambit of swachhata itself in the broad aspect of it. That means you need to have spot on policy governance and policy initiatives at all levels, swachhata. So let's start from there and where the QCI plays a key role 25 years down the line.
Sure, Anand. Glad to be with you. And as you mentioned, when Prime Minister Modi took the nation and the world by storm, 15th August 2014, when he made that huge announcement from the Red Fort that India was going to become Swachh by the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. I was then in Vietnam, in Hanoi. I was working in the World Bank. And I was amazed, like the world was, that a Prime Minister was talking about the hitherto taboo subject of sanitation from the Red Fort and that huge commitment he made. So I was very lucky, 14 or 15 months later to be recruited as Secretary in the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation and to come back to India and to play an important role in implementing the Prime Minister's vision for a Swachh Bharat. Now again, that vision which the Prime Minister threw out, he took that taboo subject of sanitation by the scruff of its neck and said, we're going to make it happen. So that commitment was huge. That political leadership was massive. And then, of course, that needed to be translated into reality. So it became very, very important to take stock first of where we were in terms of the baseline, right? And again, as you spoke about quality, the Prime Minister never compromises on that. It was a huge target. We had to bring 550 million people in rural India out of that habit of open defecation. And then we needed to provide 100 million toilets to enable them to use. But all this, the quality of the program was very important. And in fact, I still remember engaging with the Quality Council of India and getting them to do a survey to find out what's happening on the ground, what's the reality of the situation. It became very important. So they came back with a very robust report, which enabled us to kickstart the program and to make sure that we knew what to deal with on the ground. So those ground level realities came out in that. So that was an important moment because we were always reminded by the Prime Minister that this is not about quantity, it's about quality. The focus of the program is about changing behavior.
Great.
It's not so much about infrastructure. So how do you get people to change their mindset of changing that centuries old habit of defecating in the open, even sometimes when they actually had a toilet. So the shift in behavior was very, very, that was the qualitative aspect of the program, and that was always our focus.
But how were you able to maintain standards? That means you need constant monitoring. And even now, in your current role as CEO Niti Aayog, you play a dual role. When I say Niti Aayog, on the one hand, you need growth. It has to be fast. Policy initiatives have to be taken. On the other hand, you are working in the spirit of cooperative federalism. All of it. One of the aspects is it's okay to make an announcement. The implementation is the tougher part. And at every step, there has to be scrutiny, monitoring, check. So how did you go about this?
So I think one important lesson I learned from my previous assignment was the importance of independent evaluation of programs. Here in Niti, we have an office called the Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office, DMEO. It's a critical part, it's an attached office of NITI. It has about 100 staff.
Okay.
They're all specialists in monitoring and evaluation. So NITI plays a very, very important role in monitoring and evaluation of the different programs of the Government of India. We have a framework called OOMF, Output Outcome Monitoring Framework. Every ministry has to come up with output and outcome indicators for their respective programs. They have to report to NITI, and we have a team here which reviews that, and we have an annual dialogue with the ministry. So that focus on quality, on measurement of output, but more importantly outcomes, is a critical part of NITI's work. And now we are trying to take this down to the state governments, because most of these programs are implemented in the states. So what is the capacity of state governments to monitor and evaluate programs, both central and state? NITI is helping states build that capacity. Again, a very, very important part is that qualitative dimension of all these programs, and NITI is at the heart of monitoring that.
How easy or difficult is it? Because we are not a nation who want to be monitored. We are not a nation who actually deliver on accountability. There is a narrative shift which the Prime Minister is trying to drive, but typically...
No, look, it's always challenging. It's not just in India, but anywhere in the world. I've worked in different countries. But, this is not an exciting part of anyone's job. And particularly if a person or a department or a program is being monitored or evaluated, typically there's a little bit of resistance typically. So again, in India, it's not unknown for people to oppose it. But I think increasingly now, when you explain the importance of both monitoring, which is more concurrent, and evaluation, which is looking more at impact and at post and looking at outcomes, when you explain the importance of this to a state government or to a ministry, they understand this, because actually this is helping them to implement their program better. So I think that's an important part of our job, is not only to build capacity to monitor and evaluate, but also to explain its importance. Because if the program is implemented better and you have better outcomes, then there's a greater chance of getting more resources for it. It's also a way of attracting more financial resources.
Correct.
So it's to everyone's advantage, and you are incentivizing performance if you take evaluation seriously. And I think that's one big effort of this government, is to make sure that programs are well implemented. One of the hallmarks of this government, as you know very well, Anand, is actual delivery. In some ways you could call it the policy of implementation. Of grounding programs at scale. Whether it's toilets, whether it's cooking gas cylinders, houses, roads, financial inclusion, health insurance, all these programs have been delivered at scale. And the Prime Minister is very, very particular about the evaluation of programs. It's got to be of good quality. And I think you can see the results speak for themselves.
Because one is you do the implementation and you monitor it. The other one is sustenance. So how do you continue to do it year on year? So is that a continuous process?
It is a continuous process, and it's a very, very important part of all the work NITI does. In my previous job, again, to come back to sanitation, we realized that the sustaining of a changed behavior sometimes is even more important than the first part. Because it's one thing to campaign, it's another thing in the cold light of day, how do you sustain that behavior? So a couple of years before that deadline or the milestone of 2nd October 2019, we set in motion a program focusing on sustainability. So Swachh Bharat Phase 2, 2.0 as we call it, approved by the cabinet, is focusing not only on broadening the definition of sanitation, looking at solid and liquid waste management, but also on sustaining the outcomes of Phase 1. So how do you maintain the communication? What are the mechanisms to sustain? What are the incentives? All of them were built in. It took a bit of a hit during COVID, but again, COVID itself was an opportunity, for people to understand the importance of hygiene and sanitation. So it came back, and now in NITI, sustainability of programs is extremely important. So the effort is to build in sustainability into the design of the program, rather than look upon it as an add-on later. And in all the programs which NITI helps ideate, design, incubate, hand over to ministries to implement, because we don't implement, right? We support effective implementation. In all that, the sustainability element is critical, and it's programmed and inbuilt into the design.
How critical is public-private partnership here? Because Prime Minister has also said that we want to be in governance. We don't want to be government. Minimum government, maximum governance. We want to help. And he's always encouraged. He said that the private sector has a huge role to play. But has there been cooperation or resistance from
I
them?
think it's been a lot of cooperation. So the public-private partnership is at the heart of most programs.
Right.
In the earlier program as well, the Prime Minister made it very clear, this is not a Sarkari program, it's
Correct.
a people's program. It's a Jan Andolan, people have to own it.
Yeah.
And if you remember his Independence Day speech, the Panch Pran,
Yeah.
the fifth Pran was all about how people have to own it, they have to be accountable and they've got to contribute.
Jan Bhagidari and
Jan
Kartavya.
Bhagidari, exactly. So again, in terms of public-private partnerships, an important role, whether you look at it from the economic front or the social front, is involvement of private sector. Look, if you're talking of livelihood and jobs, it's all coming from private sector primarily.
Correct.
Government is not in the business of creating jobs, right?
Correct.
Primarily, right? It's going to come from there. But also to attract private investment. So a lot of efforts of the government in terms of attracting private investment, of asset monetization, how can private capital be deployed? It's a major part of the sort of policy agenda of the government.
Sustainability, you talked about it in terms of how do I continue. But the other aspect is SDG. So we are also partners to that, and SDG is something which the Prime Minister is also obsessed with. SDG 6, SDG 5. Some of these goals are tough ones. How are we doing there, and what is the Niti Aayog's
So
role
Niti
there?
Aayog, on the SDGs, Niti Aayog is a major player. So we have a sustainable development goal index where all states are ranked on their performance towards the SDGs. If you look at all the programs this government has implemented over the last 8 years, most of them are SDG focused. If you look at overall SDG performance, globally, you'll find India is one of the top performers.
Yeah.
In all sectors, you know, whether it's women empowerment, whether it's on health, nutrition, whether it's on climate, on life, lifestyle for the environment, the Prime Minister's new program,
Yeah.
that's squarely about responsible production and consumption. As the Prime Minister made very clear, whether it's water and sanitation, on energy, this government has delivered most of the sustainable goals well on schedule. I have to say, well ahead of many other countries.
Yes.
So SDGs, a major part of the agenda of the government, but that's 2030. This government has delivered well before that.
Yeah, they have. But is it purely a one-time thing, or has it now become a habit? And how much is the private sector, because they are going to play the key, working with this? Especially when the Prime Minister says, I want Make in India to stand and represent quality. But quality at a time where we don't compromise on the ecology, environment, but we continue to grow. So these are too many parameters for us as a nation to do, because a lot of the developed countries today, they compromised on environment while trying to focus on quality and trying to raise their own. And today they are imposing those restrictions on us. So we are waging a battle, and it's a double-edged sword for us.
You know, as the Prime Minister announced the Panchamrit at COP26 at Glasgow, on climate in particular, but overall, I think the private sector has come on board. So we need green growth essentially.
Correct.
And so decarbonizing the economy, decarbonizing the transport sector, Niti's played a major role, as you know, in the promotion, the policy on EVs, electric vehicles, on renewable energy, on green hydrogen. These are all areas where private sector is now coming in a very big way. So I think everyone is aware, and it is not just about CSR. It's from a business point of view. It makes sense for private sector to focus on decarbonizing the industry and decarbonizing sectors, and going ahead, this is going to become critical. So I think we are all in it together, public and private, and I think there's a clear understanding about that.
You have a state-of-the-art resource center. Tell us a little more about it. What is this resource center going to be doing?
So we've got a number of centers, but one of the centers which I think is really focused on innovation and technology is the Atal Innovation Mission. And so this is a group of people, basically youngsters in Niti, who innovate, who come up with programs like the Atal Tinkering Lab in schools, where youngsters in class 8 to 10 essentially are introduced to technology, to blockchain, to AI, and they start literally tinkering with it, and that's led to many startups. So this has led to a sort of focus on innovation, on creativity, on technology for the younger generation. So that's one huge resource we have already. In addition to that, we focus on a number. You take EVs, the whole thrust on EVs, the policy, 50,000 electric buses to be now coming on board, and how do you make the transition, which is linked to the overall energy transition. Many areas where NITI is focused on data, on how do you use data for evidence-based policy making. There's a huge program on that as well. So I'd say on many of the frontier areas, thinking now but looking ahead, NITI plays a very important role.
Final 2-3 questions, Mr. Iyer. First is, where has the QCI integrated itself into the system, the various wings? There are multiple wings and they've always worked on this in shadow. Do they also have a role in making sure that the policy itself is robust? Because sometimes you roll out a policy, then you should not be in a position that midway you have to roll back or tweak. So there is a quality check. There has to be a certain level of swachhata in the policy also.
Sure. No, QCI, in addition to working with many other ministries, works quite closely with NITI. And at least in a couple of areas, we are talking of the quality of policy making.
Correct.
That's an interesting area which we can consider. But in terms of specific programs, they've come up with a very interesting concept of how do we encourage non-resident Indians who are interested in giving back to India. Can you have a directory of Indians who are very interested in pro bono coming back? So that's an interesting initiative, and we're working with QCI on that. Another important aspect on the quality of project management. It's a critical area.
Correct.
Because there's so much of infrastructure activity in India today. It's just, you go anywhere, whether it's a highway or a port or a bridge or a building, there's a lot of economic activity. Now, how do we make sure that we have qualified project managers to run these programs? QCI has again come up with a proposal for that. So I think in the quality space, QCI has done a lot of work, and I think this could be a frontier area. The quality of policy making is an area which we need to look at probably.
I'm asking you this because you remember the drone policy that came out. Within a year, it had to be withdrawn, redrafted, and had to be brought. Now, one would say that the government was agile enough to respond to the need of the day, but now when we're looking at Gati Shakti, and then you're looking at a drone corridor and a drone policy being redrafted, it just comes to mind that should there be a certain amount of emphasis there, and the Niti Aayog and perhaps QCI could play a role.
I think it's an interesting area where you can have some oversight. Maybe QCI can play a role, but remember that Gati Shakti, for example, or the National Logistics Policy, these have inbuilt qualitative dimensions and quality assurance processes. They go through a very rigorous process. These are very, very highly tuned, state-of-the-art programs which are going to have a transformative effect on industry, on infrastructure, and actually even in the social sector. So I would say most of the programs which are rolled out have an inherent quality assurance process, but of course there's always scope for oversight, for course correction, as you mentioned. So that needs to go on.
What are your challenges, or what have you set for yourself? You've assumed charge. I know it's crazy in terms of the workload and what needs to be achieved, because there is a pace that has been set, and it's been set by the Prime Minister itself, because we are trying to achieve in 25 years what we should have achieved in the last 75. So everybody understands that. But for you, what are your benchmarks?
As you mentioned, the Prime Minister, he keeps everyone on their toes with the incredible energy he demonstrates. As he's talking of the Amrit Kal, the next 25 years. So there's a vision he's thrown out, which he articulated in his 15th August speech, the Panch Pran. And now the challenge is, what is the roadmap towards the vision of the Amrit Kal? And so that's a primary focus of everyone in government, because he's laid out the vision. Now it's up to everyone to take that vision, convert it into a roadmap with milestones, and to look ahead. In NITI, we play an important role in the policy dimension, as you mentioned. But so we are the national think tank, but we are both think and do. Do in terms of helping others to implement, but we are behind the scenes. We support, we incubate, we monitor, and we support. But we are also an instrument, the Prime Minister, the government's instrument to enhance government effectiveness, both in the center and the states. Critical role to play with the states to achieve that $5 trillion economy. How is each state contributing towards that? How is every district contributing? So we do a lot of thinking and strategizing on those lines. So again, in Niti, we have to sort of think today, but in the medium term and the long term. And the challenge is trying to put all that together, and again to work with other departments, but also to work with the private sector, with civil society. And so it's an important sort of coordinating, policy making, innovating, supporting role, but it's very exciting.
It is. Like you said, internally you are looking at ODOP, like in Uttar Pradesh, one district, one product. Other different states have different policies. That's one, and each state has set a target. So Maharashtra is competing with Uttar Pradesh, and others are coming in and saying, all right, I'll contribute 1 trillion, 1 trillion, and we've got 28 states. If all of them try to work towards that, we'll get a different level. But we are also now assuming the presidency of G20. India is now portraying itself as a world player, as a market for the world. What do you think is our biggest challenge?
As the Prime Minister has made very clear, this is India's opportunity. We are currently, I would say, in a sweet spot. India's economic performance, its prestige in the world, the Prime Minister's sort of global standing, the ability to influence geopolitics, diplomacy, etc. So it's a fantastic opportunity to showcase India economically, socially, many different aspects. So I think it's a whole of government approach. Everyone needs to stand shoulder to shoulder.
Right.
And it's not just whole of governments, whole of country, as the Prime Minister said. So it's a unique opportunity for those 1.4 billion people, as you said, to showcase India's growth, its potential, and how it can become a major world player, which it already is, but also an economic superpower. So I think it's a unique opportunity, and we need to seize the moment, and the strategy is to do that.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much.